The desert was not kind that night. It swallowed the last of the sun and wrapped the land in a cold, merciless silence. Coyotes howled on the distant ridge, their cries echoing off the mesas like warnings. But beneath that wild darkness, a single figure moved with certainty: Apache. He was a man no one challenged. Not out here. Not where the wind carried stories of him like drifting sand, tales of his battles, his strength, and the uncanny calm he carried even in the presence of death. Some said he spoke to the earth. Others said bullets avoided him out of respect or fear. But the truth, as always, was more complicated. Apache was not invincible. He had been hurt, betrayed, hungry, lonely, just like any man. The difference was that he had survived every wound. And on this night, when he discovered the faint figure collapsed near a dry wash, he didn't hesitate. The woman was barely breathing, clothes torn, skin scraped, and worse, fresh hoof tracks cut through the dirt around her. Someone had been chasing her. He knelt beside her, tilted her chin, and saw fear even in her unconscious expression. A white woman, young, too thin, clearly running from something she didn't name. He could have left her. Some said a man like him should leave trouble alone. But Apache had never been the kind to walk away from a soul who fought this desperately to live. He lifted her into his arms and carried her back toward his people. Word spread instantly through the Apache camp, sparks jumping from mouth to mouth. He brought home a white woman. He traded half his horses for her. He must want something big if he's paying a bride price. Claire Whitmore didn't know any of that when she finally opened her eyes 2 days later. The first thing she saw was a tent roof stitched with beads and feathers. The second was a campfire flickering outside, shadows moving gently like dancers. And the third, because he was always near, was Apache himself. He sat cross-legged, polishing a knife with slow, rhythmic movements. His long braids were tied back, his jaw sharp, his eyes dark and unreadable in the firelight. He didn't startle when she gasped and tried to sit up. Instead, he set the knife aside and rose to his feet with steady grace. "You wake," he said in a deep voice touched with the rough edges of a man unused to speaking softly. Claire's heart pounded. Her lips trembled. She scrambled back against the blankets, fear rising like a shadow behind her ribs. He didn't step closer, didn't grab her, didn't shout. Instead, he crouched on the other side of the tent, giving her distance. "You are safe," he said simply. But Claire had heard rumors, whispers in frontier towns about fierce warriors and women who were never seen again. She shook her head rapidly, panic clawing its way up her throat. "No, no, please," she whispered. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. He reached for a clay bowl and pushed it gently toward her. "Eat," he said. "You need strength." Claire stared at him, at the honesty in his tone, the calm in his posture, and something inside her hesitated. Not trust. Not yet. But something close. Still shaking, she took the bowl with both hands and sipped the warm broth. He watched her carefully, and after a moment he said the words she would carry with her for the rest of her life, even though she didn't understand them at first. "I paid dearly to have you as my wife and to have you every day. I want many children." Claire froze. Her spoon clattered to the ground. Her voice was barely a breath. "What?" Apache didn't smile, didn't shrink. He simply spoke the truth. "I gave horses, silver, my word," he said. "So they allow you stay. You belong to me. My wife." Claire's pulse roared in her ears. She had run from one prison only to wake inside another. But as she stared at him, really looked at him, she realized something unexpected. He wasn't leering. He wasn't reaching for her. He wasn't forcing anything. Instead, he looked almost unsure. as if he feared she might reject him. He stood, stepped back, and said quietly, "When you are strong, we talk more. Until then, rest." He left the tent without another word. Claire remained frozen, bowl trembling in her hands, staring at the flap he disappeared through. She had no idea yet that the price he paid wasn't for ownership, but for protection, and that he had saved her from men far worse than himself. The next morning, Claire woke to the smell of wood smoke and the murmur of voices outside the tent. For the first time in years, no panic jolted her awake. Instead, confusion weighed on her like a heavy blanket. She was alive. She wasn't running. No cold cell. No drunken stepfather shouting her name. Just warmth, safety, and a man she did not understand. She stepped outside hesitantly, shielding her eyes from the bright Arizona sun. The Apache camp stretched out in a half circle of brush shelters and hide tents, smoke curling from cooking fires, children darting past with shrieks of laughter. Women cleaned hides or cooked. Men sharpened weapons or tended horses. Every single head turned toward her. Whispers followed her like dust in the wind. Is that her? The white woman? He paid too much. She is weak. She will bring trouble. Claire's cheeks burned. She hadn't felt this exposed since the night she fled her stepfather's ranch with nothing but a ripped dress and bruises on her arms. Then she saw him. Apache stood on a ridge overlooking the camp, talking to a group of older men who looked like chiefs or judges. His posture was controlled, powerful, and confident in a way she couldn't fully explain. And when he looked down at her, Claire felt a pull in her chest she did not want to feel. He came down the slope in slow, measured steps, every movement deliberate. "You walk," he said, stopping in front of her. "Good." She swallowed. "Why? Why did you bring me here?" "I found you dying," he said. "You needed shelter. But you said you paid for me." He nodded once, unashamed. "So you stay. They do not cast you out. They do not return you to men who chase you." Claire's breath caught in her throat. "You know about them? Hoof prints. Drag marks, blood." His deep voice softened just a little. "You fought. You ran. You survived. That tells me much." She stared at him, stunned. He had read the ground like a book, but before she could speak again, a sharp voice interrupted. An older Apache woman, her hair braided with shells and her eyes sharp as flint, approached them, her expression full of judgment. "She is too thin," the woman snapped in Apache. "Too pale. She will not give strong sons." El Apache didn't flinch. "She will," he said simply. Claire didn't understand the language, but she understood tone. The woman scoffed and walked away, muttering under her breath. Claire watched her go, feeling smaller by the second. "They don't want me here," she whispered. "No." He paused. "They do not know you yet." It wasn't a cruel answer. It was honest. And somehow, that honesty steadied her more than soft words ever could have. He motioned for her to follow him to a small fire, where he had set out food on a woven mat. Not together separate. 2 bowls. 2 spaces. Enough distance to show her he wasn't forcing his presence on her. "You eat," he said. "Then I teach you." "Teach me what?" "Our words. Our ways." His gaze held hers. "So you can walk here without fear." She blinked, startled again. "Why? Why are you being kind? After what you said last night?" His jaw flexed. He looked at the ground before answering. "You are my wife," he said quietly. "But I do not touch a wife who fears me." Claire's breath stopped. She had expected demands, expectation, pressure. Instead, she found something else entirely. Respect. She didn't know what to do with it. For the next few hours, he taught her simple words: sun, water, fire, sleep. His deep voice was patient, warm even. When she stumbled, he waited. When she pronounced something right, he nodded once. A small approval that warmed her more than it should have. Children gathered to watch, giggling when she mixed up words. One tiny boy scrambled into her lap without hesitation. Claire froze at first, then melted, brushing dust from his hair. The children didn't fear her. That alone eased a knot in her chest. Later, as the sun dipped low, she dared to ask the question burning inside her. Why me? Apache studied her for a long, quiet moment. When I found you, I saw strength, he said. A woman still breathing when she should be dead. A woman with spirit. He paused. I have lived alone too long. Something in her heart shifted. She still feared the future. Still didn't fully understand him. But for the first time since her world shattered, Claire felt a strange, steady truth. This man, this warrior, didn't save her out of desire. He saved her out of loneliness, and that was far more dangerous. By the end of her first week in the Apache camp, Claire knew one thing for certain. Apache was everywhere and nowhere. He rarely spoke unless needed. He never raised his voice. And yet Claire felt him constantly, like the steady heartbeat of the desert around her. At sunrise, he stood on the ridge above the camp, scanning the horizon for danger. At midday, he trained the younger warriors, moving with fluid, lethal grace that made her breath catch unexpectedly. At night, he sat by her tent, always outside, never entering, keeping watch while she slept. That was the part she understood the least. A husband who didn't sleep beside his wife? A man who claimed her but never reached for her? A warrior who spoke of children but didn't touch her even accidentally. It made no sense, unless he wasn't the monster she'd feared at all. One night, after the campfire dimmed and the wind carried the scent of sagebrush through the tent, Claire found herself unable to sleep. She tossed, turned, then finally pushed aside the hide flap. Apache was there, sitting on the ground with his back against a log, sharpening a spear tip under the moonlight. He didn't look up. You cannot sleep? She hesitated. No, you are safe. Rest. Safe. Such a small word, yet so foreign to her life. Instead of going back inside, she sank to the ground a few feet away from him, hugging her knees. The night wrapped around them in a quiet, almost tender silence. Why do you sit out here every night? She asked softly. His hand paused on the spear. Slowly, he set it aside. To guard you, he said. You don't have to do that. Yes, he said without hesitation. I do. Claire's chest tightened. Because I'm your wife? He nodded once. She stared at his broad shoulders, the way moonlight carved silver lines along his jaw and cheekbones. For a man feared across the territory, he looked strangely lonely. Do you do that for all your wives? Claire meant it as a teasing jab, but her voice trembled too much for humor. I have no others. He looked at her then, eyes steady and dark. Only you. Something hot and unfamiliar rippled through her. But you don't even know me, she whispered. I know enough. His voice softened. I know you carry fear in your breath. I know men hurt you. I know you ran through the desert with nothing but will. Her lips parted, startled. She hadn't told him any of that. He didn't need words. The ground told him. Her body told him. Her silence told him the rest. He rose to his feet and stepped toward the tent, but instead of entering, he touched the flap. You sleep. I stay. She reached out before she could stop herself. Wait, he froze, turning slowly. Claire swallowed. Do you want me to sleep beside you? His brows drew together in confusion, not desire, not command. Confusion. I want you when you are ready, he said. Not before. Her breath hitched. Those were not the words of a captor. Not a brute. Not a man who had purchased her to take whatever he wished. Those were the words of someone who understood restraint deeper than most men understood hunger. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Finally, he inclined his head and stepped back into the night. Claire watched him until her eyes grew heavy, warmth blooming in places she had shut off years ago. Over the next days, their rhythm changed. When she helped the women grind corn, she felt his gaze from across the camp, quiet, steady, watchful. Not possessive, protective. When she walked among the horses, he followed at a distance, pretending to check the tack. When another warrior spoke too boldly to her, Apache appeared so silently the man stepped back in alarm, yet he still never touched her. The tension between them, unspoken, simmering, grew with each passing day, and Claire found herself thinking about him in moments she shouldn't. The way his hands wrapped around a bowstring, the way his voice dropped when he spoke only to her, the way he kept space between them, as if afraid his presence would frighten her. One evening, as the camp prepared for a hunting ritual, she stepped close to him without thinking, close enough to feel the heat of his skin, close enough to smell smoke and pine on him. He stiffened. "Claire," he murmured, her name strange and reverent on his tongue. Her heart pounded. "I'm not afraid of you." His eyes widened, just a fraction. He reached up, slowly, carefully, and brushed one strand of hair from her cheek with the back of his knuckles. The touch was feather-soft, almost hesitant. "That is good," he whispered. "Very good." But he didn't push further. He stepped back instead, breathing hard as if restraining himself took effort. That night, as she lay awake, Claire finally understood. Their marriage was no longer a matter of price paid. It was becoming something far more dangerous, something built on longing. Neither of them dared speak aloud. The sun had barely risen over the desert when trouble arrived in the camp, not from the outside, but from within. A rival warrior, tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes like chips of flint, strode through the village. His voice carried across the tents, sharp and accusing. "She weakens the tribe," he shouted in Apache. "A white woman brings misfortune. Why do you protect her, chief? Why do you waste your strength?" Apache's expression did not change. He did not shout back. He did not move to strike the man. He simply stood, tall and silent, letting his authority fill the space. Claire's chest tightened. The words stung in a way she hadn't expected. They weren't whispers of danger. They weren't the lawmen chasing her across Arizona. These were her husband's own people questioning her presence, questioning her. Something inside her shifted. Fear clawed at her. Yes, but anger flared higher. She stepped forward from the shadow of the tent. Every eye turned toward her. "You speak against him?" she said in the shaky but determined voice she had practiced every morning as she learned the language. "You speak against the man who saved me, who brought me from death to life." Murmurs rippled through the tribe. Some shook their heads. Others stared, fascinated. "You see a white woman," she continued, raising her voice. "You see weakness. I see a warrior. I see a man who would risk all horses' silver, his own life, to save me. And he did it. And he does it every day. And I will honor him as my wife, even if I have to fight for him with my voice." Apache's jaw tightened, but there was no surprise in his eyes. He knew her words would shock them. But more than that, he knew her heart. The rival warrior's face twisted in anger, but Claire didn't back down. She squared her shoulders, her voice ringing out across the camp. "You see a woman who runs. I see a woman who survives, who refuses to bend, who belongs here not because he paid for her, but because he chose her, because she chooses him." There was a silence, thick and electric, that stretched for a moment so long Claire could hear the desert wind swirl around them. Then the elder women exchanged glances. The children stopped playing. Even the men who had doubted her hesitated, unsure how to respond. Finally, the rival warrior ground his teeth and muttered something under his breath before stomping away. Leaving the camp buzzing, El Apache stepped forward at last, his voice low but commanding. "She speaks true," he said. "She belongs. Her loyalty is mine, and mine is hers." Claire's heart pounded. Relief mingled with fear, the kind that only comes from standing at the edge of something dangerous and refusing to step back. He did not touch her, not yet, but he closed the distance between them just enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You are brave," he said quietly. "Not many would speak as you have." "I learned from you," she whispered, barely able to meet his eyes. "You saved me. You never asked for more than that I live, that I fight, that I trust you." El Apache nodded once, slowly. There was an almost imperceptible softness in his gaze, a flicker of something behind the calm, deadly exterior he always wore. That night, the camp settled into an uneasy peace. Claire lay in her tent, but sleep did not come immediately. She thought of the way he watched over her, the way he let her speak, the way he never forced her into a role she wasn't ready for. And for the first time, she felt pride in her own courage, pride in the bond growing between them. When El Apache finally appeared outside her tent, she did not flinch. She did not retreat. She simply watched as he crouched near the fire, sharpening his knife with the familiar rhythm she had grown used to. "I will not fail you," she whispered. He looked at her then, his dark eyes unreadable for a long, tense moment. Then he inclined his head, a small, quiet acknowledgement that spoke louder than words could. And as the desert wind carried the scent of sage and smoke through the night, Claire understood something new. Their marriage was no longer only a matter of survival. It had become a partnership, a fragile, tense, dangerous partnership, and one neither of them could afford to break. If you want, I can continue with Part 5 explained in 700 words, where the outside threat returns and tests both Claire's courage and El Apache's devotion. The dawn broke over the desert like a silent warning. Birds chirped, the coyotes retreated to their dens, and the wind carried whispers of trouble. Claire had felt it before she even saw them, horses in the distance, hoofs thundering across the open land. Not just any riders. Men who had been hunting her for months. Her stomach tightened. The ones she had fled from in Arizona, the ones who had made her life a living nightmare, had finally found her. "El Apache," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're here." He had been sitting silently, sharpening a spear, his head tilted slightly as if he had been expecting them. Calm, unreadable, unshaken. "They seek you," he said quietly. "They will not find you alone." Claire's pulse raced. "They won't stop. They'll take me back." "They will not take you," he said, rising. His movements were fluid, a predator ready to strike. "I will not allow it. You are mine. They will not harm you." The men approached the camp, their guns gleaming in the morning sun, eyes scanning for the woman who had eluded them for so long. They shouted commands and threats, calling her a thief, a liar, a runaway. Their words were venomous, meant to intimidate, but she noticed something else: hesitation. They had heard the stories of El Apache, of his power, of the price he had paid for her. Still, Claire's fear spiked. They were armed, ruthless, and desperate. If he hesitated, she didn't want to think what might happen. El Apache stepped forward to meet them at the edge of the camp. His presence was like a wall of rock, unyielding, massive, dangerous. He didn't raise his weapon immediately. He didn't shout. He simply stood, letting his authority and reputation speak for him. "She is mine," he said, voice low but steady. "And if you wish to harm her, you will answer to me." One of the men laughed a cruel, nervous sound. "You think we'll leave empty-handed? A white woman in Apache hands? Not likely, Chief." El Apache's hand brushed against the hilt of his knife, a subtle motion that spoke louder than any threat. The men's laughter faltered. A tense silence followed, broken only by the whinny of a horse and the desert wind. Claire, though terrified, felt a surge of something fierce and protective rise in her chest. She stepped forward, despite El Apache's glance that told her to stay back. "I am not going anywhere," she said, her voice louder than she expected. "You will not take me. Not now. Not ever." The men looked at her, shocked by her defiance, but more than that, they were unnerved by the calm, deadly certainty in the eyes of the Apache standing beside her. Then, without warning, one of them made a quick step forward, hand reaching for a weapon. El Apache reacted instantly. He moved like a shadow, intercepting the man with a precision that left no room for doubt. The fight erupted, swift and brutal. El Apache's movements were a blur, controlled but lethal. Forcing the intruders back step by step, Claire stayed close, her own fear sharpening into determination. She grabbed a fallen branch, ready to defend herself if needed. She wasn't helpless. She would not be. When the last of the intruders finally fled, their horses kicking up dust in a cloud behind them, the camp fell silent. Claire's legs shook. Her chest heaved. And yet, she felt a strange exhilaration. El Apache approached her, his dark eyes softening slightly. "You fought well," he said quietly. "You are brave." Claire could barely find her voice. I couldn't just let them take me. Not after everything you've done." He nodded once, slowly, then reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of unspoken promises, protection, and respect. "You are mine," he said, almost to himself. "And I will keep you safe, no matter the cost." That night, the camp settled into an uneasy peace. Claire lay awake, listening to the wind in the desert, feeling the weight of her gratitude and fear intertwined. She had survived once again, but this time, she had not survived alone, and as the first stars appeared in the vast, silent sky above, she realized something profound. For the first time in her life, she had someone who would fight for her, not because he had to, but because he chose to. El Apache had saved her. He had defended her. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, he had begun to earn her trust, not as a captor, not as a stranger, but as a husband and protector. The desert night was quiet, the stars like scattered diamonds above the mesa. The camp was asleep, save for the soft rustle of the wind through the sagebrush. Claire lay awake, her thoughts tangled, heart pounding. The day's events facing her pursuers, standing by El Apache's side, surviving together still raced through her mind. For the first time since she had fled her past, she felt something unfamiliar, not fear, not panic, not despair, but a pulse of warmth, of connection, of belonging. And at the center of it all was him, El Apache. He had not touched her since the battle. He hadn't forced his claim, despite his earlier words of desire. Yet, every look, every careful motion, every quiet presence told her he wanted her not as a possession, but as a partner. The tent flap shifted, and there he was, silhouetted by the moonlight, strong and steady. He did not enter immediately, simply stood and watched her, as he had done countless nights before. "Claire," he said softly, the single word filled with reverence and something deeper, something that made her chest tighten. She sat up, her body instinctively tense but her heart willing. I'm not afraid," she whispered. He took a measured step closer. The space between them was charged, electric. His eyes searched hers, silent question and longing intertwining. She realized in that moment that this was not about force. It was about consent, about trust, about connection. "I want you," he admitted quietly. "Only when you are ready." Her lips trembled. She had imagined this moment countless times in the dark corners of her mind, but reality was far more potent, far more consuming. I am ready," she breathed, the words trembling but true. Slowly, he lowered himself to her level. His hands did not grasp or command. Instead, they hovered, testing the boundaries of her comfort. One long, gentle hand brushed a strand of hair from her face. His eyes softened, waiting for her to respond. She reached for him without hesitation, her fingers tangling in his hair. When their lips finally met, it was gentle at first, a question, a test, a promise. And then the restraint broke. Months of tension, longing, and unspoken emotion poured into that kiss. Fierce and consuming, he cupped her face, guiding her slowly as the heat of the day and the adrenaline of the fight melted away into something tender, intimate, and raw. Every touch, every breath, was a confirmation of trust, a silent agreement that they were equals in this moment, joined not by transaction or obligation, but by desire and choice. Time lost meaning. The desert night became a private world, lit by moonlight and the fire of shared longing. He moved with care, teaching her the rhythm of his heart, the patience in his touch. And she followed, trusting him, learning him, letting go of the walls she had built for survival. When it was over, they lay side by side, silent in the aftermath, the soft hum of the desert around them. Claire rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady pulse beneath her ear. For the first time, she believed she belonged somewhere entirely, without question, without fear. Apache's hand rested lightly on her back. "You are mine," he whispered. "As I am yours." She tilted her head up, meeting his gaze. "Not because you paid, but because you chose me, and because I choose you." His lips curved in a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Then we are equals." And for the first time since the day he had saved her, Claire felt whole. The marriage that had begun with price and obligation had finally become something real, something intimate, something passionate, something enduring. It was not the law, the tribe, or even survival that bound them. It was trust, courage, and the fire of two hearts finally acknowledging what had been there all along. Outside, the desert slept. Inside the tent, two souls were awake, entwined, and united in a bond that neither fear nor circumstance could break. For Claire and Apache, the first night of true intimacy marked not just consummation, but the beginning of a marriage built on understanding, desire, and a fierce, unshakable loyalty. The desert sun rose like a blazing warning over the horizon. Claire had grown accustomed to the rhythms of the Apache camp, the quiet mornings, the long afternoons spent learning their ways, and the nights wrapped in the protective shadow of Apache. But today, unease hummed in the air like a low, insistent drumbeat. Riders appeared on the distant ridge, cavalry scouts, moving fast with banners that marked their intent. Claire's heart froze. The men who hunted her before had been cruel, but the uniformed soldiers were merciless, wielding authority and law that she could not evade. "Apache," she said, her voice tight with fear. "The cavalry. They're coming for the tribe." For me, he didn't react immediately. His gaze swept the horizon, assessing the distance, the angle of the sun, the movement of the riders. Every instinct, every muscle, every thought he had honed over decades of desert survival kicked into gear. "They will take you," she said, almost accusingly, panic rising. "They'll bring you back to the white world, away from me." Apache's eyes softened, a rare flicker of vulnerability crossing his face. He stepped closer, his presence commanding yet protective. I give you freedom," he said quietly, his voice heavy with sorrow. "I will not force you. If you leave alive. If you stay, you risk everything." Claire's chest tightened. Risk everything? She looked around the camp, the children, the elders, the warriors, and saw the weight of his decision pressing on him. He had offered her a choice, a true choice, not a command or a demand. "No," she said firmly, stepping closer. "I will not run again. I choose you. I stay with you. Whatever comes." He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching for fear, doubt, hesitation. Finding none, he nodded once, sharply. "Then we prepare," he said. The day became a whirlwind of motion. Apache warriors moved silently, securing the camp, readying defenses, and guiding women and children to safe shelters. Claire watched, heart pounding, as El Apache's authority commanded the tribe. His calm, deadly precision left no room for error. She wanted to help, to fight, to contribute, but he stopped her gently. "Stay," he instructed. "Stay safe. Watch, learn. Protect what you can without danger." Claire obeyed, though she did so reluctantly. She felt the weight of helplessness pressing against her chest. But she watched him, how he moved, how he communicated without words, how he led with both strength and care. She began to understand what the tribe had seen from the start, a man who was fierce, unyielding, and devoted beyond measure. By mid-afternoon, the cavalry arrived at the outskirts of the camp. Scouts moved forward, guns raised, eyes scanning for signs of life. They shouted orders in English, demanding the surrender of the white woman. El Apache emerged to meet them. He did not shout. He did not flinch. He simply stepped forward, shoulders squared, eyes dark and unyielding. "She is my wife," he declared. "She belongs to me. You will take nothing from this tribe." The commanding officer laughed nervously, glancing at the warriors ready to defend their homes. "She is a runaway." By law, El Apache interrupted with a slow, deliberate step closer. His hand rested lightly on the hilt of his knife, enough to signal danger, enough to make even seasoned soldiers pause. "By law," he said, voice low and lethal, "you will leave with your lives intact or not leave at all." The threat was simple, clear, and unbreakable. The men hesitated. The tribe watched, holding their breath. Claire stood beside him, her hand brushing his, feeling the warmth and strength that had become her anchor. Hours later, the cavalry finally withdrew. Unnerved by the calm authority of El Apache and the unwavering loyalty of his people, the camp exhaled in relief. Though the danger had reminded Claire of how fragile peace could be, she looked up at him, heart pounding. You could have let me leave." He tilted his head, dark eyes softening. "And lose you?" "I could not. You are mine, not because of payment, not because of obligation, but because I choose you." Claire reached up, resting her hand against his chest. "And I choose you," she whispered. For the first time since the threat arrived, the tension in her chest eased. In that quiet desert moment, she understood the depth of his devotion and the true meaning of their marriage. It was no longer about survival or contract. It was about trust, courage, and an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of danger and choice. Outside, the desert stretched endless and silent. Inside, Claire and El Apache faced the future together, ready to fight, to love, and to protect each other no matter what storms were yet to come. The desert had a way of teaching patience. Months had passed since the cavalry had retreated, and the camp had settled into a rhythm of safety and quiet resilience. Claire had become fully accepted by the tribe. No longer the outsider, but a wife, a protector, a mother in spirit, if not yet in name. El Apache moved among the people with his usual authority strong, calm, and ever watchful. But there was a softness now, a quiet glow that only Claire seemed to notice. It was in the way he glanced at her across the fire, the way he offered a hand to steady her when the children tripped over the dust, the way his voice held a gentleness that only appeared in the moments they shared in private. One morning, as the sun rose pale and gold over the mesas, Claire felt a flutter deep in her chest. It was subtle at first, a whisper of intuition, but undeniable. She had been careful in the weeks prior, learning to read the signs, understanding her body in ways she hadn't before. And now she knew. She went to Apache as he sat polishing his weapons outside their tent, watching the horizon for danger even in peace. "Apache," she said, voice soft but certain. "I am with child." His hands paused mid-motion and his eyes widened. A flicker of astonishment passed over his dark face, quickly replaced by something fiercer, joy, pride, and an intensity she had never seen before. "You?" He breathed, reaching for her hands. "You carry my child?" Claire nodded, smiling despite the nervousness curling in her stomach. "Yes, we will have a family." For a moment, he simply stared, the weight of his emotions settling over him like a desert storm, powerful, overwhelming, and unstoppable. Then he lifted her into his arms, holding her against his chest with a force that was both protective and tender. "My wife. My children. My life," he whispered, voice trembling slightly with awe. This is what I have wanted all my life. And now it is real." The camp noticed the change immediately. Where he had been reserved, he now moved with a quiet joy, often found walking beside Claire, speaking to her in low tones that made her laugh and blush. He trained the younger warriors with an intensity tempered by the new warmth in his heart. And he was gentler with the children, always watching for their laughter, never letting fear touch them. Weeks passed, and the first signs of new life grew within Claire. Apache remained at her side, sharing the simplest of tasks, gathering water, repairing the tents, even preparing meals. The intimacy between them had deepened far beyond the passion of their first night. They were partners, confidants, lovers, and parents-to-be, united in a bond stronger than any desert storm. One evening, as the sky burned with the colors of sunset, Claire rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His arm wrapped around her shoulder, and his fingers traced gentle patterns along her arm. "I want many children," he said softly, almost reverently. "Strong, healthy, proud children. Ones who will know their mother and their tribe, and who will know love as I have learned it from you." Claire lifted her face, meeting his eyes. "And they will," she said with certainty, "because we will teach them together." He smiled, a rare and full expression that softened the harsh edges of the warrior the world knew. "Then we are complete," he whispered Dot. In the months that followed, their life blossomed. Laughter filled the camp. The children, both tribal and those they would soon welcome into the world, ran freely across the sun-baked earth. Claire found herself teaching the young girls and boys, while Apache shared stories of the land, the stars, and the ways of the Apache. Their love became a foundation for the tribe itself, a living testament to courage, loyalty, and trust. And one morning, when the first child was born, a healthy, wailing boy, Apache held him close, tears in his dark eyes. "This is the first of many," he whispered to Claire, pressing his forehead to hers. "Our family, our life." Claire rested her hand on his chest, feeling the life that had brought them together and the life they would now nurture as one. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to belong, to be loved, and to be wanted not because of payment or obligation, but because love, choice, and courage had forged a bond unbreakable in any desert, storm, or trial the world could send. Together, they faced the horizon, hand in hand, hearts intertwined, and lives bound by the promise of family, loyalty, and the enduring power of love.